Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about. I don't place much stock in studies. I think they're all politicized or just bullshit or idiotic nonsense. But I've seen a few sort of run of quite a few over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, where they talk about. How skilled, and you see these often, how skilled are students, college levels, university level students when they come out, and whether they've got, an undergraduate degree or master's, PhD, or whatever, how skilled are they to do the jobs that they're attempting to do, or they're, in their so-called chosen profession. And the other was, or the others have been studies suggesting that senior, like C-level sort of managers and executives are complaining about their workforce not being capable of doing the job. Now, why you would sort of be responsible in a company for hiring people who can't do the jobs, a bit beyond me, but we all know affirmative action is the big player in that. But so they're saying that between 25 and 30% are utterly incompetent. This is of the workforce. This is, remember, C-level executives saying between 25 and 30% of their workers are utterly incompetent, can't even do the most basic of the basic shit. And 3/4 of the, nearly 80% actually, not far off 80% in total, either are incompetent or can only do the most menial, basic level tasks of their job description. Now, clearly something's wrong here. You're either hiring the wrong people, you can't train them properly, you're not giving them the right guidance and direction, the job descriptions are crap. Something's wrong when you get that much of an issue. But let's go back to the basics here. Now, most companies are under a lot of pressure to hire based on affirmative action. So it's the proverbial black lesbian sort of gets the job. Now, it's unreasonable to expect when you're hiring someone just because they're a black lesbian, it's unreasonable to expect they'll also be an expert at the job or at the task you give them. Certainly my experience is wherever you see affirmative action, you see mass incompetence and mass ineptitude. The greater the affirmative action sort of requirements, race, gender quotas, then the greater the ineptitude. And not just people who are, incompetent or something, but you also get, most of the time, you get a bad attitude as well. So, but let's sort of look at say in some of the retail jobs where you see people with an atrocious attitude, then you've got to kind of cut them a bit of slack because they're about the lowest paid jobs around or close to it. So, that's a life of misery and drudgery, I think, for a lot of people, younger people living day to day. They don't even have enough money to, even if there were 2 or 3 of them together, they'd struggle to manage paying rent on a 1-bedroom apartment or a shitbox 2-bedroom apartment. It's that tight. They can't own a car, or they can't have a vacation or anything like that. So that's the life. So you've got to cut them some slack given the misery. Now, similarly, because they're paying shit money, they're not that easy the jobs are not that easy to fill. I've noticed that some of the major retail chains where they'd say if you've had more than 3 months in prison, for example, meant you were disqualified. Now they're saying that it doesn't matter as long as your crime wasn't serious. They don't care how the fuck long you're in prison for. That won't disqualify you from employment. I mean, is that how it is now? So, but just looking at this wider thing, because it incorporates not just people at the entry level jobs, but also college graduates, people with master's degrees, and so on. And there's the studies are saying that people used to be more competent. I don't know if that's actually true. I think people that would have gone on to do jobs. Look, there are a few issues here to consider. You look at every kid who's been through college has been told that it's the patriarchy, Nazis are everywhere oppressing them. We're all on stolen land, oppression, fascism. the white society is not legitimate, the law is not legitimate, nothing is legitimate. Nothing is legitimate. And it's a terrible, terrible society that has to be torn down, replaced with some vague sort of paradise that no one can ever articulate or explain or demonstrate that it's going to be better than anything we've got or have ever had. So students coming out or who've been through college have this mindset. It's a terrible place. White people are all evil. Every straight white male in existence is Hitler personally. So they come out of there thinking, well, we've got sort of, and then they've got jobs that don't pay enough to have a life of any, they just exist day to day is about as much as 90% plus of these kids can hope for. So it's a rather bleak future, and they've been told everything's bad. They put two and two together and say, well, the reason that the future is bleak is because everyone is fucking Hitler. We're surrounded by Hitlers. That's the reason why. And so they come out with rather an unfortunate attitude. And they're studying things like gender studies and lesbian dance theory and goodness knows what. And they don't really have any skills. And every course taught in university now has within it a very substantial gender studies component, whether it be law or anything else. Only hard engineering or pure maths and those sort of things really don't have either none or very little of that. But you look at even business studies and marketing, and pretty much every course now, any female student in particular has the option of writing in her final thesis and exam as an option of writing how has marketing in the world today affected women, and where there's no right or wrong answer. And so all you have to do is trash straight white males and Christians and you're good to go. You've got your degree. So the quality of education is very poor. And it used to be that only 3% of kids, certainly when I was at high school, only 3% of kids made it to university. It was a strict cutoff, strictly pass or fail, that's it. And if you didn't make it, it was almost like an auction system. I remember, I remember this kid wanted to get into medicine. He had to get 85% in the graduation exams to get into medicine. And if there just happened to be a bunch of bright kids that year that were going, then even if you were really good, you could. And this kid got like 82% instead of 85%. That was it. He didn't make medicine, and he had to go and do something else. And I remember how crushed he was that he'd missed out in this strictly pass or fail thing. But I think he could have, I'm thinking about it, he probably could have made quite a good doctor. But anyway, because 60% of kids now, or 40+% in the US and 60% in places like Australia and Britain, or certainly that's what they're targeting, they're going to university. They're not going because the basis they're bright kids. So the brightest kids who wanted to learn, wanted to get ahead, wanted to contribute, wanted to be the best, wanted to appreciate excellence, they're maybe still going to university, but you're looking at most of the kids in university now have none of those aspirations. They're not pursuing excellence or anything like that. And even if they did, when they arrived at university, they've got so many courses and lecturers now that are telling them that white society is bad and stolen land and genocidal maniacs, Hitler and Nazis, And so this is a mindset, a very negative mindset that they go into the workforce with of, why should I give a fuck? Everything's so bad and evil. I got to do this just to put food on the table. But why do I have to be enthusiastic about it? It's only capitalist Nazis anyway. Yeah. And so there's just not the same attitude, a positive attitude and a can-do attitude and I want to achieve attitude. And I can contrast that with, when I'd come out of college, was in the was the cadet trainee, as they called it back then. And we were all a bunch of young guys, and we wanted to change the world. We wanted to find a cure for cancer. We wanted, and excellence was something that we just pursued in its own right. But today, people would look at you like you'd gone insane if you were talking like that. Excellence? What's excellence? Oh, you Hitler! That would be the response you'd get now. So we're in a very different world with very different attitudes. So coming back to the thing, if you've done marketing, but most of that marketing, for example, marketing at university or business studies, whatever, or anything really, if most of that had been lecturers telling you about there are Nazis everywhere, it's your job to root them out and this sort of thing, then you'd arrive at work with this, or start your career, start working. And the gig economy means careers are harder to come by, of course, but you'd start work with very different attitudes in terms of applying yourself, trying hard. I want to learn to do my job well. I want to, achieve excellence, and I want to do the best I can. And this, you wouldn't have those attitudes because everything's so bad. There's just so many Nazis, so much oppression, so many Hitlers everywhere. That why would you even try? Why would you bother? Why put in the effort, for fuck's sake? And so there's, I think, a lot of that. Now, just on top of that, if you look at the amount of people that through affirmative action are waved through high school, great. Again, these kids that in year 9, the third year, end of the third year of high school, there was this huge clean out when I was at that high school of kids that just weren't any good. They were just told, look, you're not a diligent, conscientious student, so why don't you go off and get an apprenticeship or hairdressing, or I don't know, plumbing or something like that. Go off and get a job. Go and do something. Sheet metal worker. So a lot of them did that. They went off and got jobs and became responsible citizens. They weren't being, they didn't have left wing. Stupid globalist propaganda being shoved at them about how evil white people are. I don't get any of that. They just went to work, became responsible, and many of them were getting married by the time they were 19 or 20, and that wasn't unusual then. Again, the same thing, acquiring responsibilities and having to balance your budget and do all that sort of stuff. And this was an important part of growing up and becoming a responsible adult, a citizen, and so on. And I remember that, just when I first started work, I remember the guy who was in charge of payroll for this quite large company, and that was his job, to make sure we got paid. And I remember listening, he was telling me, hey, Billy Bob, it's critically important. Everybody has to get paid and paid on time. These people are relying on that payment. They've got wives, they've got families. We have to make sure. It is my job to make, and how vehement and intense and serious he was about it. His responsibility as a citizen to his fellow citizens, to his fellow, like his colleagues and all this. I don't see that sort of same dedication to responsibility today. At all. I mean, you might see occasionally here and there, but it's a rarity. So we're looking, coming back, we're looking at because of the sort of courses kids are doing, students they're doing now. It's so heavily loaded with propaganda and Marxist nonsense and so on, and anti-white and anti-white nations, anti-white male. It's loaded so heavily with that straight white males think, well, gee, I better not try too hard, otherwise I'll offend the black lesbian, and I don't want to do that. Otherwise, people might start calling me Hitler. So I better just do a crappiest job I can, and then in that way I don't offend anybody. So you can see these sentiments around. But if I'm too confident what I'm doing, people are going to accuse me of being a Nazi. So I better really dumb down what I'm doing. So there's just no incentive to be a high achiever or to pursue excellence, and I think that feeds into the wider dialogue of this as well. Now, if you look at affirmative action and the practices of hiring people purely based on race or gender or a combination of both, then, and I see it around me all the time, but this idea of if we hire people who are unqualified, and then we also are going to, this is C-level executives, and we're also going to complain that these people can't do the job. So you have to make an adjustment. If you're going to hire people who are blatantly unqualified, particularly when you're willfully and purposefully not hiring the qualified. So the qualified people are there in front of you. Can't say, no, we're not going to hire those qualified people because too many of them are straight white males. But what we're going to do instead is we're going to hire unqualified people, simply because they're race, gender, quota and everything. We're going to hire unqualified people. Then we're not going to train them. We're not going to make them qualified or capable, because if we place upon them an obligation to perform and perform to a higher standard. They won't be able to do it, which means we've got to get rid of them. And then the people are running around accusing us of being Hitler because we required these incompetent people to actually do their job as well as a white person would do, a qualified white person would do. So if we do that, then everyone's going to accuse us of being fascists and Nazis. So we can't do that. Instead, we'll just bellyache to people doing these studies that 75% of our workforce is incompetent. Now, it's I mean, there are other factors feeding into this, of course, such as the big multinational companies increasingly merging with government, which has merged with the globalist, the WF, merged with the globalist sort of cabal. So these companies increasingly are not having to compete for business out there. They're just being given, huge taxpayer-funded government contracts, whether it's in pharmaceuticals or defence or massive labour hire, the big international consulting firms being used as mass labour hire fronts, these sorts of things. So that none of them have to actually work and be the best or be good at what they do. They just have that crony, corrupt relationship with government and each other, and that's it's a cabal and it's a monopoly and so on. So they don't have to be good. So they can actually afford to have incompetent people there, but to also complain about it is a bit rich. So when we look at it, the kids coming through college and not being trained, that half of their course plus is all gender studies components or subsets of gender studies courses. So they've injected gender studies everywhere into pretty much every course in university. And most of the people that are being affirmative actioned into it, particularly on race gender basis, are doing essays. How do you think international business has affected your life as a black lesbian? And that's on that basis they're going to get a fucking degree. Now, when you look at someone who's got a degree in engineering, you think, well, they must have studied engineering, but in fact they haven't. They've done an essay on how has being a black lesbian affected you how has engineering affected the lives of black lesbians, and that's what they got their degree on. They didn't get it on crunching the hard numbers and doing the design of the bridge or something like that, or the design of the 10 million story building, and none of that. They got the easy. They just copped out and did the essay on black lesbians, but still were given an engineering degree. When you, as an employer, when you look at that engineering degree, you don't know that it came from doing an essay on black lesbians. You just assume that they've done the work. Now, after you interview them and put them on the job, you realise real quick they haven't got a fucking clue. But this is part of the problem, that the degrees have become now worthless whenever there's a minority group concerned. And there are, of course, there'll be exceptions, but whenever there's a minority group, the degrees have been horribly devalued. And I've interviewed straight white males who've still actually passed the engineering course. And I've interviewed in the same batch people with the girls, the black lesbians who've got, on the face of it, they've got like a super distinction, summa cum laude and magna cum laude. They've got the top of the top degrees, much better than the straight white guys have got, but only the straight white guys know what they're doing. The other ones didn't. So again, the fake degrees, the affirmative action, which now permeates junior high school, senior high school, all the way through college, into masters, into PhDs, and so on. So that they're not coming out with the education they once did, and certainly no standards of rigor, and of course the added baggage of, well, why the fuck should I bother? And also the slippage, where you've got wage slippage, where you've got such a small number of people now making enough money to even live independently, let alone get ahead. And that number, and again, that number shrinking fast, courtesy of the globalist system that's being imposed on us all without our knowledge and consent. So these are the issues. But it's actually, I think these studies are probably reflecting some reality, but there's no tying of this reality or tying it back to the causes of it. They're just saying that it's so, that it is so. There's nothing you can do about it. That's how it is. And by the way, it's all the fault of straight white male Nazis anyway. No, it's not. but really, if you look at any economy and structure of the economy and anything about an economy, if you adjust one part of it, affirmative action, waving through all these people are incompetent, then you have to then adjust in other areas. You've either got to accept much lower standards, much less new wealth creation, which is what we've got, You have to accept more monopolies, more getting screwed, a lower standard of living, which we've got, or you have to compensate in other ways. So, okay, we'll hire these people who haven't got a fucking clue what they're doing, but they're going to have to then meet a standard of excellence or a higher standard of rigor in the company, in the business. Once they get out of college, they're going to have to meet a certain, and we will do internal training to make sure they meet that standard. Once you do that, once you set independent and impartial standards of rigor, then you have to accept the fallout that most of those people, you'll have to fire them and get rid of them. They won't be up to scratch. And that's something that they just won't do. So the corrective devices and mechanisms and policies and procedures for actually getting the corrective action in place is something that politically and ideologically, no company is prepared to do. They just can't do it. We'll hire the black lesbians, but we won't then demand or require that they meet a certain standard. So ideologically, they just can't do that. So they just let the whole thing go and let it slide, which is where we are now. So I think those studies are probably an accurate thing. What's a tragedy and a travesty, in my view, is that no one's learning anything from that. No one's extrapolating from this that, well, if we've got all these unqualified, incompetent people, again, due to affirmative action, what do we do? Where do we go from here? We accept, the only place we're going to go from here is lower standards of living and a higher cost of living and so on. That's the only place of more monopolies and actually more exploitation on a mass scale than would ever have been the case in a competitive, rigorous market-based system. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.